Have you ever felt something so strongly that you assumed the feeling must be telling you the truth? Fear says, something is wrong. Anxiety says, something is about to happen. Overthinking says, keep thinking. Maybe you'll finally figure out how to be safe. And because the feeling is happening inside your own body, you naturally assume, this is me. But what if it isn't quite that simple? What if the emotion you're experiencing is real, but the explanation you've attached to it isn't necessarily true? What if your memories are influencing it, your expectations, your environment, your attention, your previous experiences? What if your brain is constantly taking pieces of the world and constructing an emotional experience from them? Then perhaps the question isn't, why am I like this? Perhaps the question is, what is happening inside me right now? Because there is a profound difference between saying, I am anxious, and saying, I am experiencing anxiety. One can become an identity, the other creates a little space, and sometimes, space is where awareness begins. Welcome to Chapter 23 of Novara Wisdom Gems. The feeling arrives before the story. Imagine waking up in the morning. Nothing terrible has happened. The room is quiet. The sun is coming through the window. Everything appears ordinary. And yet, something feels wrong. Your chest feels tense. Your thoughts begin moving faster. You remember something you have to do. Then another thing. Then a conversation from yesterday. Then a possibility about tomorrow. Suddenly, your mind is constructing a story. What if I fail? What if they are disappointed? What if something goes wrong? And before you've even identified what you're feeling, you've already started explaining it. That's one of the fascinating things about emotion. The body can react, and the mind can begin searching for an explanation. And once the explanation arrives, we can mistake the explanation for reality. The invisible orchestra. Imagine an orchestra. You hear one piece of music, but there isn't one instrument creating it. There are dozens. Strings, percussion, wind instruments, different rhythms, different notes. Together, they create one experience. Emotion can be thought about in a similarly layered way. A memory can influence what you notice. What you notice can influence how you interpret something. Your interpretation can influence your bodily response. Your bodily sensations can then become additional information your mind interprets. And suddenly, a whole emotional experience emerges. It can feel immediate, personal, certain, but beneath that experience, there may be many processes interacting. Memory, attention, expectation, context, interpretation, body sensations, past experience, present circumstances. The feeling is real, but it doesn't necessarily arrive with a perfect explanation attached. The threat that isn't there. Imagine receiving a message. Only 3 words. Can we talk? That's all. One person reads it and thinks, sure. Another thinks, did I do something wrong? Another, something must have happened. Same message, different internal experiences. Why? Because the words themselves don't contain the entire emotional meaning. The mind contributes something. It fills gaps. It predicts. It interprets. It searches memory. And sometimes, it fills uncertainty with the most threatening explanation available. Not necessarily because you're weak, not because you're broken, but because human minds are built to detect significance and potential danger. The problem is that a system designed to protect us from uncertainty can sometimes make uncertainty feel like danger itself. The overthinking machine. Now imagine an enormous machine. Inside it sits one question. What if? The machine produces. What if they don't like me? Another gear turns. What if I made the wrong decision? Another. What if something goes wrong tomorrow? Another. What if I missed something? Another. And the machine keeps running. But here's the strange part. It feels productive. You're thinking, analyzing, predicting, preparing, trying to solve the future before it arrives. But sometimes, thinking doesn't produce clarity, it produces more thinking. The machine doesn't answer the question, it manufactures another question, and another, until you aren't solving a problem anymore. You're rehearsing uncertainty. When emotion becomes identity, this is where things become even more subtle. Imagine someone experiencing anxious thoughts repeatedly. At first they say, I'm having a difficult week. Then, I've been feeling anxious lately. Then, I'm an anxious person. And eventually, that's just who I am. Notice what happened. An experience became a pattern. The pattern became a description. The description became an identity. And now the person may begin interpreting new experiences through that identity. This is why awareness matters, because an emotion can visit you without becoming your name. You can experience anxiety without making anxiety your identity. The emotional mirror, written across the reflection, I am anxious. The words begin dissolving. The mirror changes. Now, I am experiencing anxiety. A little more space appears. Then, what is happening right now? And suddenly, the person isn't fighting the emotion. They're investigating it. What happened immediately before I felt this? What am I imagining? What am I assuming? What am I remembering? What is actually happening right now? What part is fact? What part is prediction? What part is interpretation? These questions don't necessarily make the emotion disappear. They do something more important. They prevent the emotion from becoming the only voice in the room. Emotions are information, not orders. Here's one of the most important ideas in this chapter. An emotion can be information without being instruction. Fear may tell you, pay attention. It doesn't automatically mean run. Anxiety may tell you, something feels uncertain. It doesn't automatically mean something terrible is coming. Anger may tell you, something matters to you. It doesn't automatically mean act immediately. Sadness may tell you something has been lost or changed. It doesn't automatically mean your future is hopeless. The emotion deserves attention, but it doesn't automatically deserve obedience. And that distinction can change the way you relate to your inner world. There's another piece we rarely discuss. Your emotional life doesn't exist in isolation. The environment around you matters. The information you consume matters. The conversations you have matter. The people around you matter. The uncertainty you're living through matters. The amount of rest you get matters. The pressure you're under matters. The expectations you've absorbed matter. The stories you've repeatedly heard matter. So when you're overwhelmed, instead of immediately asking, what's wrong with me? Perhaps ask, what am I being exposed to? What have I been watching? What have I been reading? What have I been thinking about repeatedly? What expectations am I carrying? What uncertainty am I trying to solve? What environment am I currently living inside? Sometimes the most compassionate question isn't, why can't I handle this? It's, what has my mind been carrying? The difference between feeling and fact. Imagine standing in a dark room. You see a shape. Your body reacts. Your heart races. Your mind says, someone is there. You turn on the light. It's a coat hanging on a chair. The fear was real, but the interpretation was wrong. This distinction is incredibly important because sometimes our emotions are responding to an interpretation rather than the situation itself, and that's why emotional awareness isn't about arguing with your feelings. It's about becoming curious about them. Instead of, this feeling proves something is wrong, try, this feeling is telling me something. Let me find out what. The weather inside, storm, rain, wind, dark clouds, then sunlight. The person doesn't chase the clouds. They don't scream at the rain. They don't demand that the sky become clear. They simply remain present, because weather changes, and emotional states can change too. A feeling can be intense, without being permanent. A difficult moment can be real, without becoming your entire life. A thought can be loud, without being true, and anxiety can be present, without becoming your identity. You are allowed to experience a feeling without becoming the feeling. The space between feeling and response. And now we reach the real point of this chapter. We cannot always choose what appears in the mind. We cannot always choose the first emotional reaction, but awareness can create a moment between what appears and what we do next. Something happens, you feel something, you notice it, you pause, you investigate, then you choose your response. That pause may be tiny, a few seconds, but sometimes a few seconds of awareness can prevent a lifetime of automatic reactions. The goal isn't, I will never feel anxious again. The goal is, when anxiety arrives, I don't have to hand it the steering wheel.
The emotion you didn't choose. Think about it. You didn't sit down one morning and consciously decide, today I will overthink everything. You didn't choose every memory that appeared. You didn't choose every bodily sensation. You didn't choose every fear. You didn't choose every thought. They arrived. And because they arrived, you may have assumed, this must be me. But perhaps a healthier relationship begins with another sentence. This is happening within me. Not, this is who I am. That tiny shift can create psychological distance. And distance creates room for curiosity.
What do you do with the feeling? So what happens the next time anxiety arrives? Don't immediately fight it. Don't automatically believe it. Don't immediately turn it into an identity. Pause. Notice the body. Notice the thought. Name the experience. Then ask, what actually happened? What am I predicting? What am I assuming? What evidence do I have? What is within my control right now? And finally, what response would reflect the person I want to become? Now we're back where chapter 22 left us. Because emotions may appear automatically, but our relationship with them can be practiced, and that practice shapes who we become. Maybe freedom isn't never feeling anxiety. Maybe freedom begins when you stop confusing every feeling with a command. The feeling is real, but the story may not be. Final Novara Wisdom Gems reflection. Perhaps you've spent years asking, why am I like this? Maybe it's time to ask a different question. What is happening to me right now? Not because your emotions aren't yours. They are part of your experience. But you don't have to turn every emotional state into a permanent definition of yourself. You can feel fear and still investigate. You can feel uncertainty and still wait for evidence. You can feel anxiety and still choose your next step. You can experience a thought without turning it into a prophecy. You can have an emotion without becoming the emotion. And perhaps that is the beginning of emotional freedom. Not controlling every feeling, not eliminating every uncomfortable thought, but learning to meet your inner world with enough awareness that you no longer have to believe everything it tells you. So the next time anxiety arrives, don't immediately ask, what's wrong with me? Ask, what is my mind trying to tell me? Then ask, is it describing reality or interpreting it? And finally, what do I choose to do next? Because the feeling may arrive without your permission, but your response can become a conscious practice. You are not required to become emotionless. You are not required to silence your mind. You are not required to win every battle inside yourself. You only need to become curious enough to notice what is happening before automatically becoming what is happening. Because perhaps the deepest form of self-awareness isn't saying, I know exactly why I feel this way. Perhaps it's being able to say, something is happening inside me. Let me listen. Let me understand, and then, let me choose. This is Novara Wisdom Gems, where we question the thoughts, the identities, the patterns, and now, the emotions we once assumed were simply us. The feeling is real, the story may not be. Novara Wisdom Gems. What will you choose when the feeling arrives?